Yes. Let's give a round of applause for the band tonight, y'all. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to The Gathering. My name is Clinton Wright, and I'm one of the National Social Justice Organizers at Repairs the Breach. Welcome to Pullen Memorial Baptist Church for our gathering on the war economy. Let's have a nice shout out for The Gathering. Let's make some noise for The Gathering. Who's here for The Gathering? Let's have a shout out for all the people who have been here month after month after month for The Gathering. And who's new? Raise your hand if this is your first gathering this month. Woo! Look at all the new people. Let's give them a round of applause. That's awesome. Welcome, y'all. As always, we're thanking Ben & Jerry's. They're here tonight. One of their flavors tonight is called One Sweet World. And if you see that flavor out and about in your local supermarket, it is supporting the Poor People's Campaign. So if you like it, buy it, have it with your family. I'd like to welcome to the mic Reverend Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove.
Good evening and welcome. It's good to see everybody. We're here for the gathering. We call it a time for reflection, revival, and resistance. We're gathered together to reflect because we want to learn something as we're preparing for this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. We know there are some things that we need to learn, and some of us, who've been impacted by one issue, have things to learn from people who are impacted by other issues. And we know here in North Carolina from this Moral Fusion organizing that we always have a lot to learn from one another. So reflection is important, but we want to not just touch our heads, but also touch our hearts. We don't like to get together without touching a little bit, without singing a little bit, without dancing, and maybe even shouting. That's right. Reverend Johnson is here to bring a message tonight, so you might end up shouting. But resistance is that third R, because we know that there's some action that needs to take place. This isn't just about what we know or what we can feel in our own bodies, but it's about what we're able to do together as a movement here in North Carolina, and folks who are joining us in other states across the country. Let's be sure and greet the folks who are at gatherings around the country and other places. Good to see you. Let me also just take a moment to celebrate this Repairers of the Breach staff, which has been nonstop on the road all over this country since August. They're organizing a 15-state tour. They've made 13 stops. If you're missing anybody tonight, it's because they're planning for a gathering that's happening in Seattle tomorrow, going to be in Birmingham, and then in D.C. Right at the beginning of December. So I wanted to be sure and let you know the gathering happens once a month. However, we're not going to be gathering on the first Sunday in December because of this gathering that's happening in D.C., which is the official launch of the Poor People's Campaign. So we will be gathering at the end of December for a special watch night service together. The gathering here in December will be for a watch night service. That's the last day of the month, last day of the year for any of you who've never been part of a watch night, but we'll get you more information about that later. I've mentioned that we have Reverend Johnson here with us tonight. I wanted to bring you greetings from Bishop Barber, who is not here physically. He's on the West Coast speaking in California today and preparing to go up to Seattle tomorrow, but he will be joining us in a little bit by way of video, so we'll get to hear from him. Tonight's topic is the war economy. We are grateful for our partnership with Veterans for Peace. Any folks with Veterans for Peace here? Give them a hand. And with our dear sisters with CODEPINK, who organize all over the country and especially in D.C. We'll also be hearing a little later on from someone who's with the Afghan Peace Volunteers based in Afghanistan. We're talking about the war economy. We always want to listen to the people who are impacted our veterans and folks in our communities here are certainly impacted, but also there are impacted people all over the world who are suffering the violence. And I think importantly today can teach us something about the violence that is inevitable in this economy. We want to pause for just a moment this evening as we've gotten news on the way in that another shooting happened in a church in Texas today. As I understand it, half of the people who were in that church were killed this morning during worship. So the violence that we have a great deal of responsibility for perpetuating around the world inevitably comes home to us in this war economy and in this economy of the proliferation of guns. So let us remember those folks as we're gathered this evening. Let me invite our band here with the gathering, and none other than the Reverend Cheryl Uzel to come and lead us in a little bit of singing as we get started.
Hey everybody. Oh my. Let's try it again. Hey everybody. Hey. All right, I like that. Okay, y'all know how this goes, don't you? Because most of you never hear me. And so you know that we have a jump off choir, right? Everybody's like, oh gosh. This is going to be a volunteer jump off choir to start out with. So if you don't volunteer, then it's going to be a call out. So since you I don't know most of you, I won't know whether you can sing or not. I'm just going to say come and make a joyful noise. All right?
Hey, Cheryl.
And tonight I have a powerful friend here with me.
Switch microphones.
Her name is Raven. And for those of you who were here to hear us warm up, you know you're in for a treat. But if you weren't here for the warm-up, just hold on, because it's coming back. But we need, come on, jump up, choir, come on. I got one volunteer already, she's coming. Come on, y'all, we need about 5 or 6 diverse folks. We don't want this to be an all-brown group. All right. That's right, come on. And we're going to start out with Down by the Riverside. Now, we're not laying down no burdens down by the riverside. We're going to do something else in here. So Raven is going to lead, and we're going to back up. We're just going to follow behind what she says, okay? We ready? All right.
Justice down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Oh, down by the riverside. I'm gonna stand up for justice down by the riverside. We're gonna study war no more. I'm gonna turn my back on war and hate down by the riverside. Oh, down by
All right. My sister said she didn't get a chance to sing in the choir today, so that made up for it. We want to just lift this little song, and it's called Soldier of Love.
All right, we got a call in here. Somebody who wants to join us. Let me put him on real quick. All right, you're on.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. First thing I want to know is who is that sultry singer I just heard with the band? That's the mighty bad reverend there that I heard just then. And I'm thankful for her. Let's give it up for the Reverend Cheryl Uzzell. So I want you all to know I'm not playing hooky. You know we're in the middle of organizing for the Poor People's Campaign. We've got 3 more stops. And so first of all, I want to ask you for prayers because it's been quite a run in 60 days to do 15 to 25 states, 15 states and train about 30 persons in our team, everybody from Steve and Erica and Clinton and Laurel and Yara and Roz. We've just been on the road. And I want to thank you for your meditations, your prayers. I'm actually in California, and I'm giving you a report from the road. We were in Sacramento the other night, and about 1,000 people showed up and said that Sacramento is in when it comes to the Poor People's Campaign. Yeah, you give it up for that. We were in San Francisco last night, and San Francisco is in terms of here in California and beyond. Today, we got a call a few days ago to join Muslims, Christians, and Jews here in Los Angeles, and they are coming in to be a part of the movement here. I might even get to see, talk to Joan Baez when I'm out here, but she's already said that she's encouraging all the people she knows to be in. So things are just moving in a tremendous way. On tomorrow morning, we leave for Seattle, and with the chaplains in the harbor who have done work among the homeless and people that still live in tent cities today, and they're in. In fact, that's where Laurel and Yara are already planning for tomorrow. So I wanted to give you this update that things are moving well. If you have not signed up, please sign up for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. 40 days of direct action from Mother's Day next year to June 21st. We need it now more than ever before. I do want to say that we all need to pause for a minute. There's been another shooting in a church in Sutherland, Texas. The nation is being forced again to deal with violence, gun violence, and the proliferation of guns. We've got to find a way to turn away from violence and guns and turn toward the virtue of love, to turn toward the de-escalation of all these guns in our society and be delivered from this kind of bloodthirst. And we've got to really turn towards lifting up and helping those who are suffering in our society rather than finding more ways to kill and harm and bring suffering in our society. These are indeed serious times, and that is why the gathering is here, Jonathan. We come together, be inspired with the music, but the music also has a message, to be focused with the message that will be given today and the testimonies that you'll hear about the war economy. And I'm so thankful that the Reverend Dr. Nelson Johnson is there to also share with us. You know, just this past week was the anniversary of the massacre, KKK massacre in Greensboro. And I'm so humbled and honored that he's even here to be here today. That God kept him and preserved him all these years to continue to give witness to the power of love, the power of justice, and the power of peace, both him and his wife. So, Jonathan, I'm out. I just wanted to call in. Cheryl, you look good up there singing, girl. All these folks off in Los Angeles talking about, who is that? Who is that? You're in front of it. And the band, we need to get y'all a contract or something, I guess. All right, anyway, I'll stop messing now. Y'all take it easy. God bless you. Have a great day.
All right. One of our partners on this Poor People's Campaign is the Border Network for Human Rights, a group that has been organizing for 20 years down on the border in Texas, and we were with them a couple of weeks ago. They took us down to the border and wanted to show us what the militarization of the border has done to their communities. And they talked to us about how saying that people are enemies and creating barriers and law enforcement and drones and patrols that remind people that they're seen as enemies inevitably makes the situation more violent, more difficult for people. They've watched that over decades on the border and wanted to invite us into their experience of organizing there on the ground and asserting their rights as people living in this country. They're teaching the Constitution in little home groups there on the border, mostly to undocumented folks. But by knowing what the Constitution says, they've been able to engage in a dialogue with the Border Patrol and to get real clear on what the law actually says. So they took us down to the Rio Grande, and Reverend Barber and some of the rest of us, we waded out there into the water, and they said, "Where's the line?" They said, "Well, the line runs right through the middle of the water." So we stood on the line with 3 families that aren't able to travel over to see their family, and their family came from the other side, and we had a little reunion there in the river. And that's the kind of thing that communities around this country are introducing us to as this campaign is in a season of really listening and learning from impacted people about how we can gather together and name the kind of community that we want to be. So we want to listen tonight to people who are impacted by this war economy. We've been at war now for over 16 years. Sometimes it's hard for me to even fathom. We went to war shortly after I got married. And we have 3 children, one of whom is now taller than his mama. And they've never lived in a country that hasn't been at war. This war on terror is a war that cannot end. And along with it are all sorts of things that build into a system that is sort of self-perpetuating. And we want to learn something about that tonight, but we want to begin by listening to the people who are most directly impacted by that. And so earlier this week, I called up Basir Bita in Kabul. He works there with the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and we were able, with the technology of Skype, to have a conversation that I think we can mostly understand, and thankful to Esther, who's helped turn it into a video with some subtitles. So check out right here, conversation with Basir Bita.
Basir, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
I wonder if, first of all, you could just describe your daily experience of life there in Kabul and how it has changed over the last 14 years.
Every day I almost wake up early morning at 6 o'clock, and then I quickly had a breakfast, and then I head to the office. My office is not much far from my home, but there is always hesitation in my heart, in my mind, that whether or not I'll be able to come back home alive. This is not only my own personal concern, but this is my wife's concern as well. And also I can tell you that almost all Afghans living in all provinces of the country have the same concern. All my colleagues in the office, they all say that we just say, "God, please save us today. I have families, I have relatives, I'm young, I have dreams, and I want to meet my dreams. God, please save me today." This is our everyday wish, and this is our main priority, to come back home alive.
Basir, can you describe what impact the war has had on the community there?
It's interesting that based on a survey that the results was released in 2015, that say that almost 90% of Afghans are suffering a kind of psychological disorder every day. But I don't know. There's one new survey released in 2017. We say that only 70 to 50% of Afghans are suffering a disorder every day. This was released by Ministry of Public Health, which is located next to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. And I guess that the survey was funded by the USAID or the U.S. Embassy. Many friends of mine left the country to Europe, to Turkey, to Canada, to the U.S. Friends of mine who used to work for the U.S. Army as a translator, interpreter, they left the country. And this is my plan. This is my own personal plan to find an opportunity and leave the country by my family, because of the everyday pressure, fears, the concerns that I have in my daily life, economically, psychologically. I feel, and I'm pretty confident that the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. government is spending too much money on keeping Afghan general and public mentality in a way that they would say that we need the U.S. Army, the NATO forces, the international forces to be in Afghanistan. And there is no mood for Afghans to rise up against this sort of invasion. But over last couple of years, it's been changed a little bit. Almost half Afghans believe that the U.S. government has invaded the country because of the bilateral strategic agreement was signed, but there is no security services by the U.S. government.
Well, I know that you are a nonviolent activist, and you have been engaging the situation from that perspective. I wonder what kind of action you're advocating for Afghans in the midst of this situation.
What we do is a grassroots activism. We go door by door. We ask the particularly younger generation to learn about nonviolence, to become a part of our organizations and join us. And interestingly, almost 2 months ago, we had for the first time, a group of nonviolent activists, young nonviolent activists, collected from 30 provinces out of 34 provinces of the country. We found young people interested in peace building and nonviolence. We brought them all in Kabul together from all different ethnic groups, where some of them had even no idea that there would be such an diversity, ethnic diversity in the country. They were astonished. We brought them together and we taught them about the nonviolent strategies. For example, we taught them how to act nonviolently when they face violent situations. This has been one of my life goal, to rise Afghans against the U.S. government's international interest in Afghanistan, to collect them and write it in front of the U.S. Embassy, because there has been some protests and rallies in front of the UN office in Kabul and some other countries' embassies in Afghanistan, but never happened in front of the U.S. Embassy. This is my goal, to find the people, to go there and to raise their voice, shout out and tell them that Yankees, go home, we no longer need you. The war, the insurgent groups, the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, other insurgent groups have been supported by you. There are many clues indicating that they are being supported by you. It's interesting that everybody in Afghanistan knows that the U.S. government paid to Taliban in order for Taliban allow them to pass their supplies. This is from one hand, and from the other hand, we have some peace building projects and interventions funded by the U.S. Embassy.
Basir, we have here in the United States a Poor People's Campaign that is also committed to nonviolent direct action to challenge our government and to call for an end to the war economy that is sponsoring what's happening to you. I wonder, briefly, what would you say to those here in the United States who are preparing for this Poor People's Campaign?
As a member of a human family, I believe that my brothers and sisters are in the U.S. and they care about us in Afghanistan or other parts of the world. My first demand from the people of America and from those who hear my voice today or tonight is that they do their best in the U.S. to change the Constitution of the U.S. from a military-oriented constitution to a pacifist constitution. The other one is that they learn more about Afghans, the Syrians, the Iraqis, the people in Ethiopia, in other parts of the world, that how they live, how they suffer the war that their government has been flaming for years. But I would like to again emphasize on the pacifist constitution.
Basir, thank you very much for joining us.
Please join me in thanking Basir. It seems like wherever we go, whether it's down on the border or all the way in Afghanistan, people want to talk about our Constitution. I mean, we're dealing with some fundamental issues here about who we are and who we want to be. And I'm deeply grateful for the chance to connect with him. The Afghan Peace Volunteers is the group that he helps to organize in Kabul and around Afghanistan, and you can learn more about them online. You know, we're very aware that our wars don't only impact, people in other countries, but they also impact those people who this country sends to fight those wars. And we're grateful that Veterans for Peace and CODEPINK and other groups that have been organizing among veterans and people who've been impacted by this by volunteering to serve our country, and have been have promised to do what they were told, and yet in lots of situations have had serious questions about the morality and about the justification for what they were asked to participate in. And so I'm grateful that Matthew Howe is with us tonight. Matthew, come on over. Here's a microphone. It's good to see you. Please have a seat. So Matthew is a veteran, has also served at the State Department, as I understand, and yet also has asked some serious questions and has spent time with Veterans for Peace in places listening to folks like Basir, and so I wanted to begin just by, I know you've been in Palestine and other places with Veterans for Peace delegations. From your own experience, when you hear someone like Basir, what's your response? What's happening inside of you as you listen to him?
And thank you for having me here, and thank you all for the music. Actually, real quick, one of the things as I've done these delegations and been on with these resistance movements, whether they've been in Palestine or Okinawa or at Standing Rock or say at Charlottesville or here, is the use of music, and how that brings us together and goes past the material, goes past the worldly, and goes past that which drives the violence. And that's what unites us all. And it's something that the other side, the people with the rifles and the money, don't have. But when I hear Basir, and I actually know Basir through a friend of mine I've worked with and spoken with, the Afghan Peace Volunteers, honestly, I'm heartbroken because the last conversation I had with them, and this is a collection of young people people, teenagers and people in their early 20s who every time up until this past summer had always been so enthusiastic and so hopeful. And this past summer, their hope was gone. Because what they were seeing was another escalation of the war in Afghanistan, a doubling of American airstrikes. And with that, because violence begets violence, and that's as true here as it is there, the car bombs have increased. The suicide bombers have increased. As well as, too, there's about 35 Afghan soldiers and policemen killed every day in combat in Afghanistan. Every year, there's a record number of Afghan civilians killed, and that's been true since we started counting that. We didn't count that, though, until 2008 or 2009. For the first 7 or 8 years when Afghanistan, we didn't keep track of how many civilians were killed because we didn't care. But that's where it goes to. But when I hear him say things like, we must change our Constitution, this is a man who knows exactly what has to happen, and the onus is on us because we're the ones who are bringing this violence to them.
You sound to me to be a person of great conviction. And, I know it's Veterans Day this week, and there's lots of talk in our country right now about, what it means to honor veterans and to respect our country and respect our flag. But you've really grappled with some of this stuff personally, and I wonder if you'd just share with us a bit of your own journey about what in your own service to the country and what you saw happening from the various places where you were serving that made you realize, like, I got to do something else.
It was taking part in the killing over and over again. I went to Iraq twice and Afghanistan once, and on that third time to Afghanistan, that was where I could no longer go along with the killing, where I could no longer go along with the lies, where I could no longer come home and go to another funeral and tell a mother that her son's death was worth it. And the lies over and over again, the rationalizations, or the careerism you saw. When I was in Afghanistan with the State Department, my next thing was going to go to Harvard or to Princeton so that I could then go back into the federal government and be an SES. And they're, a senior executive service. That's the type of thinking you have, and we excuse the deaths, we excuse the violence. One of the things that I've come to realize is that what our state religion is a state religion of militarism. Just on the train the other day, there was a midshipman, a Naval Academy midshipman on the train, and this kid, he's probably 19 because he was a sophomore at the Naval Academy, because you can tell by their name tapes. It says, or name tags, it says, Morris 20 or whatever his name was. And a lady came up to him and said, "I'm so sorry, I forgot to thank you for your service." Now this woman could have been like a pediatric oncologist who was saving children every day from cancer, but she was apologizing to him because she had forgotten to partake in the ritual of thanking the military for their service. And what you see and what you do and what you experience is this hero worship, where we are basically these acolytes of this religion. And so we are untouchable. And so anything I do, I am thanked for. When the realities of my service, if you want to call it that, which you can't call it that, because the realities of it, the sum and total of it, is the death, is the killing I took part in both places, whether directly or indirectly. And that has affected me when I came home from my second time in Iraq. The moral crisis I had, the moral injury is a term that's used now, the guilt, which is what I believe drives most of the suicides that we see in the veterans community, is the guilt. And we know this from studies. We know this, the VA has done plenty of studies on this. They knew this as early as 1990, that the best predictor of suicide in Vietnam veterans was combat-related guilt. And this has been affirmed over and over and over again in studies both in the US and internationally as well. But for what happens to me, though, is this, when you lose that, when you lose who you think you are, because you've taken part in something that was so wrong, this killing, it rips the moral foundations out of you. It rips your moral spine away. And so the descent goes quickly to suicidality. And that's something I've been dealing with for 10 years now, and I manage it and I cope with it, but it still comes back. It's a condition I'll have for the rest of my life. But this is the cost of taking part in the killing. And we see this as well too. It's no coincidence, and it comes from this culture in this country of violence-based solutions, of militarism. It's no coincidence that we've killed 1 million to 1.5 million people in these wars since 2001, and we have the highest murder rate in the world, right? It's no coincidence that we have the highest incarceration rate. Or when you see things like...
We have this phenomenon of mass shootings, which doesn't exist in other places.
Absolutely. Or not taking care of our people. It's no coincidence that the day Trump announces the largest weapons deal to Saudi Arabia, $300 billion, is the same day that his people in the White House say, we're going to cut Medicaid and food stamps by $700 billion. No coincidence. And so it's these kinds of things. But as a person, on an individual level, the experience you go through is hell. It's an emotional destruction that I can't begin to explain. It's why so many guys put pistols in their mouths to end it.
You know, I'm a Baptist preacher, and I've spent my whole life listening to conversion stories. You know, we talk about how folk got born again. You strike me as someone who's had a conversion experience. I mean, you were talking about a kind of civil religion that you don't believe in anymore. And I wonder, you know, as you're turned away from that, we're talking in this Poor People's Campaign about the need for a moral revival. You know, you're talking about this kind of moral center that's missing in our society. What are you turning towards? What kind of draws you and gives you hope as you think about where we're headed?
It's what I see sitting here in front of me, all you people. It's the work I've been fortunate to do through various organizations, whether with Veterans for Peace or with CODEPINK or Iraq Veterans Against the War. But taking part in something that I didn't know existed anymore, my soul, and the utility of love, and understanding what moves this world and the camps that move the world, in which we have a choice to be in. We can either be in the camp of violence, the camp of money, or we can be in the camp of one another and love. And there's never been a time where it's been more real, the consequences. We're either going to die slowly from climate change, or we're going to die wicked quick from nuclear weapons. Does anyone know what percentage of nuclear weapons we need to detonate in order to have a Holocaust? Yeah, it's like not even 0.3%. Would kill off a couple billion people. And this is what we have. And so the choices we have, this is not academic. This is not just some dude who went to war, came back crazy, you know, and is now like this pot-smoking, love-for-all kind of guy. No, this is a very real choice.
You don't strike me as that at all.
This is a very real choice, you know? So we have this, and we have to be cognizant of it. One thing, too, if you notice the poppy I'm wearing, the white poppy, this goes to Armistice Day. We try not to use the term Veterans Day because it was originally Armistice Day. That's right. And the white poppy symbolizes all deaths in war. There's actually a purple one for animals as well. But, and this goes back to what the original intention of Armistice Day was before in the 1950s when they changed the Veterans Day, which was done because of the Red Scare and of the militarism and the nationalism and the McCarthyism that was going on. This was basically no more, never again. And that's what we must do, and we listen to men like Basir, and we see that we're not following that.
Well, yeah. That's certainly a thank you from all of us. But let me also, since you've rediscovered your soul, let me just say, bless your soul. Because indeed, we need to rediscover our souls in the way that you have and give ourselves fully to exactly what you're calling for. So thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now a word on the war economy from Bishop Barber.
And then lastly, we've got to challenge the war economy. You got to have a movement that understands the connection between systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy. Now, I want to say something today very carefully because I've been watching the news some, and I'm through. I'm deeply sympathetic for General Kelly and the loss of his son. And I have deep pastoral sympathy for the 4 young men that died and all of the men who died and women who died, and many of them who died fighting in places like Iraq that we should have never been in the first place, and America has never truly repented for how we go around and we set up dictators like Saddam Hussein, and when they don't do right, then we send our boys and our girls over to uproot them. Today, though, I heard the general say, he said, if you haven't served or have a family member that served, he said, you don't know how to make calls. He was making an excuse for the president where he called the pregnant woman, said, you don't know how to make calls. Now, that's not true. That you don't know how to be compassionate unless you've had somebody serve in the military or die in the military. I pastor veterans. My deacon chair is a retired Army Ranger. My trustee chair is a veteran. The people who helped me in security, one of them was a veteran of Vietnam. And they don't do it just because I ask them. They actually do it because they love the work we do, and they love the fact that we are standing up against the war economy because they've been there and they know what can happen if this military-industrial complex is left to itself. People don't know in the Moral Monday movement, when we went to jail to protest extremism, the clergy and the veterans led us in. Veterans who said they didn't go and fight halfway around the world to come back to North Carolina and see voter suppression. They said they didn't go fight halfway around the world to come back to North Carolina and see politicians who get free health care or subsidies for their health care, and then they block other people from getting health care. They said, we didn't fight for that. In my pocket, where I go, I won't show it because I don't want the political fallout for the brother, but I carry a general star, a general's coin. Some of you military know what this is. I was given to me by a general, and he wasn't an African American, who gave me the coin and he said, thanks to those of you in the movement, because while I'm in the service and I have to possibly go to war, we need what your movement is doing, because somebody has to keep fighting for peace, because anybody that loves war is out of their mind.
That's right.
And a general told me that. But the day when I heard General Kelly say he was stunned by a member of a Congress or a congressperson who listened to a call, that bothered me. First of all, evidently he doesn't know how the black community works. You don't have just one mama. You don't have one aunt. And when you're going through trauma, we call everybody over.
That's right. Come on now.
We have something called wakes and stuff, and everybody comes and everybody brings food over.
Yes.
The congressperson wasn't acting as a congressperson. She helped raise that boy.
That's right.
And her mama, his wife had asked her to come. He was a son of the community. And when he said he was stunned by the fact that she listened to the call. But if the call hadn't been crazy, what would have been wrong? I'm glad she listened to the call. I'm glad she wasn't there alone. But what bothered me about that, and I'm not hating on anybody but Mr. General, I know you've been general, but you haven't come publicly and said you are stunned by Trump's racism. You're his chief of staff, and you haven't said you are stunned about the way he talked about John McCain.
Yes.
You didn't say, you've not come forward and say you were stunned by the way he talked about the Muslim brother and his son. You haven't said publicly you are stunned by Trump's goal to end the Affordable Care Act, which will actually hurt veterans. In North Carolina, the refusal to expand Medicaid is blocking 30,000 veterans from getting health care. You haven't said that you are stunned by the way he's attacking immigrants when we have Muslims and Latinos and many other people fighting in the armed services. We gotta watch this stuff. God knows in my heart, I know you're hurting, Brother General, your son got killed and other, but you can't say certain things like this publicly and dismiss other reality. You, Mr. Kelly, you didn't say you were stunned about the way the president has lied about voter fraud, which is one of the freedoms soldiers fight to protect. And I say this as a son of a Navy man who went into a segregated Navy in 1940s. My father, who was willing to give first-class blood for second-class citizenship, I'm stunned that so many of you would try to make the oppressive and the racist and the mean comments and actions of this president be normalized. When I left home, and I go home, and I've got another member that's a woman that's headed to Korea right now. And Mr. Kelly, you've not stood up and said you're stunned by the reckless behavior of Trump toward Korea. Huh? You said, Mr. Kelly, he said this, he said when he was young women were sacred, and religion was sacred. He said this today, and life was sacred. He said, and it looks as like that's no longer true. He said he's stunned by that. He's bothered. But you aren't publicly stunned by a president who took 5 deferments from serving, a president who has violated women, a president who has violated religion and misused it, and has violated the most sacred call of religion, that is to care for the sick, the poor, and a president who has literally violated the very things you said you thought was sacred. And I'm stunned that you would get up and say only those who knew a Gold Star family could ask him a question. He said that today. When he works for a president who is president in spite of ever serving. In fact, who got deferment. And the reason I bring that up tonight for my last point is what we saw today was a display of military arrogance. When you think you can limit who questions you, when you think that you can say statements like those in the military are the best 1% of the nation, what does that do to the rest? You don't even have to say that. You can just say they're great, they're best. You don't have to equate them as other folk as being less than. And the problem with military arrogance and this war economy is that it has gotten this nation into more trouble.
I know it.
Right now, because of military arrogance, taxpayers in the United States are spending nearly $4 trillion for wars since 2001. According to Joseph Stiglitz's Nobel Peace Prize economy, that money could have been used to transform our nation. Used to transform our nation. 54 cents, 54% of every discretionary dollar goes to the military. Not health care, not jobs, not education, not infrastructure. That's immoral.
That's right.
To be having a conversation now that we need to build the nuclear arsenal as though being able to blow the world up 6 or 7 times is not enough. To have a president that's calling for $54 billion more to go to the military than the Congress even asked for. $1 billion of our bloated military budget could pay for 12,000 elementary school teachers, 17,000 infrastructure jobs, 100,000 Head Start slots for children, 30,000 scholarships for university students. Now the question is, what will make us safer? More and more and more and more money for building the mother of all bombs, or money for jobs, education, healthcare, and infrastructure? That's the question. And that's the question we must put before America. It's immoral that our communities are being militarized, as the Pentagon provides free access to military weapons and equipment left over from Washington's wars to the local police forces, which are supposed to protect us. We have to deal with our war economy and systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation. And finally, we have to deal with the moral narrative.
I want to invite Raven back up here to sing one more song. And after she comes, as we say in church sometimes, the next voice you will hear is none other than the Reverend Nelson Johnson.
gonna come. Change is gonna come. Change! You know, there is such power in music. Sister Raven, in a sense, it makes you want to just sit down and soak all of that up. So I just want to thank you, lifting our spirits. If I were reporting to duty 55 years ago, it would start like this. AF 147-67590, Airman Nelson Johnson reporting for duty, sir. I was an 18-year-old, lured by the glamour of military service. And I thank God that God blessed me to survive that period. So I am here tonight, 55 years later, reporting for duty. I want to be a part of building this nation's strongest peace, poor people's movement that can bend the moral arc of this nation away from war and violence and toward our own humanity and the dignity of all of God's children. I'm reporting for duty tonight. You know, I want to thank all of the, Brother Matthew, I could have listened to you for a long time, you know, and for just the impressive way that we are gathered here. Beloved, today I've been given the task to join with you in engaging the issue of our war economy and poverty. And there can be no more pressing or important matter. As a nation, an empire nation, we are in a period of permanent war. Wars that are draining and, dare I say, bleeding away our national human and material resources. Tragically, this situation is resulting in growing impoverishment. Larger and larger parts of our national population sinking into poverty, which is contributing to growing atmosphere of conflict, of bitterness, division, and violence. And it was sad to learn, even today, somebody walked into a church and killed 20-some people. And this is not all by accident. It grows out of an atmosphere. This brief picture that I've just sketched out, for many of us, describes a set of bleak, pressing issues. I've come tonight, however, as a person of faith who's learned to look beyond the troubling immediate moment to the great potential that is ours, even in this moment, to turn this nation around as we grow our understanding of the war economy. Not only grow our understanding of that, its relationship to poverty, and then learn to work together and walk together to bend the moral arc of the nation. And for that reason, I am so glad that there is a new poor people's campaign, a moral campaign to draw us together from around the nation, both from the bottom up and from the top down. Everybody can be a part of this movement if you sincerely love humanity and you love your nation. Those who love the nation can talk to the nation and tell the nation that you're on the wrong course. So I hope we've all come tonight as people with fierce determination, whether you call it faith or not, a determination to equip us to look beyond the bleakness of these presenting issues, which actually reflects the weakness of the nation. You know, when a nation has to lie and get a lying president, and actually has to put all of this money into the military to keep other people from hurting it, it's a weak nation. A strong nation has the moral fabric that people want to be a part of it and don't want to hurt it because you're doing good things and you're helping people to live good lives. It's a weak order, but it's dangerous. And so we want to help grow the potential and the possibilities as we begin to imagine and believe and work together. I want to say right through here that I'm pinch hitting for Dr. Barber. I accept my role as a pinch hitter. I'm trying to get a bunt to move the runners ahead just a little bit in this race to redeem humanity and save the soul of the nation. Beloved, war and poverty form a kind of toxic symbiotic relationship, with each component contributing to the other. The more we wage war and the war economy, the more poor young men and women die on the battlefield and die at home from the lack of health care. And at the same time, we are draining away more and more resources to the war economy, thus creating even more poverty. And when the current situation of escalating war and poverty is seen from another standpoint, from the standpoint of the military, industrial, political elites who make billions of dollars off of war, it is easy for them to justify more war in order to take more resources of other nations and to give crumbs to the impoverished masses in this nation to blind us and keep us from seeing the truth. And that if we saw the truth, we would turn against them. And so we're in this cycle of perpetual war. So as Barber said, Reverend Barber said, therefore, we must challenge war and the war economy. And when that is done, we are challenging systemic racism. We will be challenging systemic poverty. We will be challenging ecological devastation, and more than that, and at the same time, we will be challenging the psychological and moral damage inflicted on the nation and its people as a result of the scourge of war. So this is a beautiful movement. This is a great movement. Let me just say a few words about the military. I was in during the Vietnam period, but fortunately I didn't go there. That's why I'm here. The national military budget for 2016 and 2017 was some $556 billion on the low end. So much of the budget is disguised. It actually comes to much, much more than that, but let me work with the public figure. That's more money than most of us can realize. We can't imagine that amount of money. Let me just try to help you with envisioning that amount of money. That's the low end of our budget. The whole state budget for North Carolina for the past fiscal year, 2016-2017, was about $21 billion. And that's only 4% of the military budget. The military budget is 22 times larger than the whole budget of the state of North Carolina. Think of a state budget. Now, the state budget includes all the employees of the state, all the school teachers, all the state troopers, all the government employees, all the National Guard. Consider all the money for buildings and maintaining services and all state government buildings for 10 million people all over the state. Consider 16 state universities. Consider thousands of public school buses and maintenance and gas. Consider roads, highways, bridges, construction, park, and the maintenance costs for a year. And the list goes on and on and on. And the state has $21 billion to do that. If the military budget were reduced by only 4%, that would loosen up $21 billion. That's a lot of money. That amount of money would more than cover the 16 million people this administration is trying to push off of the health care road. 4% reduction. Imagine what could be done to pay teachers all over the nation better wages and to reduce the obscenity of the school to prison pipeline. 4% reduction. Imagine new hospitals that could be built, 4% reduction. Imagine the ecological good that could be done with a mere 4% reduction. And then imagine how we could help veterans who continue to suffer from the scourge of war while people are playing games and people are dying waiting to be treated. No, it didn't happen. The military budget was not reduced by 4%, but increased by more than 8%. All of this money is being spent in the war economy. And while it's being spent, millions are striving to live on less than $10 an hour. Tens of thousands of people are living without adequate health care, and many are dying premature deaths. While hundreds of thousands are living in substandard housing, decaying neighborhoods, some homeless, sleeping on the streets, sleeping under bridges, in box and tattered rags, all in this nation that's spending that money on the military. While our public schools are underfunded, leading to under-resourced, overworked, and undermotivated teachers, this situation is crippling millions of children right now, and the jails are stuffed with them. Many of these children wind up in the school-to-prison pipeline, where our jails and prisons are bulging with millions of new slaves, many of whom are the descendants of chattel slavery. Many of whom have no inspiration to push forward in life, while Native American people, the original inhabitants of this land, are shamefully forced onto reservation, themselves under-resourced and exploited. Instead of a modest 4% decrease in funding, there's been a $54 billion increase, more than was initially requested. Some of y'all remember President Eisenhower, himself a five-star general. Eisenhower said there's a big danger growing in the nation. He named it the military-industrial complex. You've heard of that. Some have appropriately renamed it the military-industrial congressional complex. This is a three-sided iron triangle. This triangle has established a network of relationships that include political contribution, political approval for increased military spending that is often not needed even from the hawkish standpoint, lobbying for support of bureaucracies and oversight mechanisms in order to get more and more money. What we're talking about here is an entire network of contracts and flows of money and resources among individuals as well as corporations and institutions. This includes defense contractors, private military contractors, Pentagon, the Congress, and of course 45 in the executive branch. This bloated budget has nothing to do with improving security. It is about gouging the public and extracting more money for the already rich. Now, you already know that everything is connected. And connecting the dots, part of what we're called to do. The congressional side of this iron triangle got elected by gerrymandering, which is drawing crooked lines to get themselves elected to cut crooked deals. they have been warped by the desire for more money and material things, and they have not demonstrated the capacity to stand for the good of the whole. That's where we are with the Congress. I heard Reverend Barber said that I didn't hear any of them doing anything substantial about the condition and the direction that the nation is moving in. As a Christian minister, allow me to invite Jesus into the conversation. You don't mind that, do you? Jesus says in chapter 24 of the Gospel of Matthew and other places, no one can serve two masters. Either he or she will hate the one and love the other, or he or she will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and money. One will be your God and the other will be a play toy that you might call God. We have an economic order built on mammon, and mammon is money and material possession, and this has warped the priority and cannot deliver for the common good of the whole of the American people. The empire, these United States, is a mammon-based system. Many poor people of all races have been seduced and have come to believe in mammon over the love of God. But mammon has become, in a sense, the god of our nation. And we celebrate that in so many ways. The measure of who is good and right and big is almost how much money you got. And it isn't even about how you got it. Otherwise, we would never have had 62 million people vote for a man who fraud college students, set up a fake university, and give out fake degrees, and then hire lawyers to get himself free. I'm telling you, we're talking about mammon tonight. And let's be clear, the fundamental choice is not between 25 things. The choice is between two things: love, and God is love. And love always values personhood, people, and it pays special attention to the poor. And then there's another God that always values money, stuff, and things. The choice is money, material things, or mammon at the expense of people. The mammon choice will work children in factories, pit people against each other to keep them from seeing the truth, go to war, kill millions and millions of people, make some people think that they are better than others, flying a banner of white supremacy, all in the service of mammon. Jesus says you can't do that. You can't serve two masters. And let me declare this evening that in my humble opinion, there is no material insufficiency in the United States, or for that matter in the world. The only insufficiency is moral and ethical, spiritual insufficiency that block the sharing and the distribution of what God has given to all of us to be enjoyed by all of us. That's the insufficiency. I want to declare tonight that the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. You know, in a sense, people play a trick. Human beings didn't create water. They didn't create mountains. They didn't create forests. We interact, and any other things around, we interact with that. And we do give it value. But then we claim it and own it and deny anybody else the right to it, because that is the way that mammon works. We get our arm around it, and then you have to pay us even to come close to it. But I want to say to you tonight that God did not intend it that way. He wanted us to share with each other. Now, allow me to draw for a few minutes on the work and the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. In his 1967 speech, just work with me a while here at Riverside, time to break the silence, King said, and I quote, "I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values." a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. And he goes on to say, when machines and computers and profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. And so unless you get our priorities right, it's hard to overcome the problem. Dr. King continued in that famous speech declaring that a true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalms, of filling our nation homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane, sending men, and I would add women, home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped, psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. Dr. King pressed the point even further, so that it almost leaps off of the page in 1967 and jump over on the page in 2017. He said that a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Beloved, it seems to me that we are moving down the road toward Dr. King's warning of spiritual death, with the threat of physical death lingering close by. And so while I'm on this whole piece about looking at the reality of what is before we look at the possibility of what can be, because you never get stuck in all of this, because it'll pull your spirit all the way down. But let me just pull it down a little bit further, and then we're going to walk it back up. Chris Hedges, a former New York Times war correspondent, in his book, War, A Force That Gives Us Meaning, writes in 2002, I learned early on that war forms its own culture. The rush of battle is a potent and often lethal addiction, for war is a drug, one I ingested many years. It is peddled by myth makers, historians, war correspondents, filmmakers, novelists, and the state, all of whom endow it with qualities it often does possess: excitement, exoticism, power, chance to rise above our small station in life and a bizarre, fanatic universe that has grotesque and dark beauty. This man was a war correspondent. It dominates culture, distorts memory, corrupts language, and infects everything around it, even humor, which becomes preoccupied with the grim perversities of smut and death. And therefore, you can understand somebody standing in the window in Las Vegas shooting 100 or so people. You can understand in the context of a war culture, somebody walking into a church and killing masses of people. I tell you, as a nation involved in and obsessed with war, this sounds like spiritual death. But God, through a man named William Barber, who reached out to the better angels in all of us, launched a great movement in North Carolina called the Moral Monday Movement. And through that movement, tens of thousands of people rose up from all corners of the state, all nationalities, all races, and started to say with a loud voice, forward together. Not one step back. It feels good to be part of a movement, doesn't it? And all of a sudden, what seemed impossible seems possible. A river is forming, a river that carves a new highway to the ocean of justice and righteousness. Reverend Barber has joined with Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Dr. James Forbes, both from New York and thousands of other people, to launch a nationwide poor people's campaign. Aren't you glad about it? In the midst of this culture, God is doing something like a root out of dry ground. It's just springing up. This launch process is spreading all over the nation. And if there ever were a time that we need a great, grounded, and determined moral movement, focus on the poor and overcoming the scourge of war, that time is now. With the war economy eating away at the resources so necessary for millions of people who are still languishing in poverty, now is the time to rise up and unite all across this nation. And I want you to believe that we can do it. Now is the time to take advantage of the opportunity to rise up, never forgetting where God has already brought us from. And so some of us sing out of our tradition. He brought us up out of slavery, where we could worship only in the bush harbor at the end of the cotton row somewhere. And we would start to sing those songs and feel that spirit, and we didn't have anything to validate ourselves except the spirit. Didn't have any money, didn't have any land, didn't have any military, didn't have any army, but we had something inside of us. And when the Spirit of God touches the Spirit of God, you believe that you can overcome. And so we have a history that we can reach back on. We have to remember the inspiring words of that eloquent poem by Maya Angelou. Sister Maya scribbled on a page, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, I rise. Never forget that we are those who rose. Yes, we rose to forge common bonds of unity between black and whites in the bitterly divided, segregated South. And now those bonds stretch across the ditches of our previous divisions of yesterday, creating new possibilities for a bright and new tomorrow. Still, we rise. We are the ones who injected nonviolence into the movement of a violent-prone nation. Still, we rise. We are the ones who rose to sing, "Before I live and be a slave, I'll die and be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free." Still, we rise. And so remember and celebrate, but don't let anyone fool you. Don't let anybody turn you around. Don't buy into a little bit of the view that you don't have power. You have much more power than you realize when you link up with kindred souls. Somebody taught me that unearned suffering is redemptive. And I thank God for the cross. Our slave parents stored up vaults of unearned suffering, and some of us have the key to the vault. And we can actually begin to call on that history, and you feel good about it. You have a voice, so use it. You have a vote, use it. You have connections, link up with others in your town and become an active part of the new Poor People's Campaign. Then link up with people across the state. Whatever state you're in, link up with people in other cities. And then push for the change that you need in your city, in your state, and join with other states and push this nation so that we can bend the moral law. As we contemplate the days ahead, we must grow our vision. One of our books of faith witnessed to the deep truth that without a vision, the people perish. Lift your head up. Look at the bright possibilities. Look at millions of people walking toward each other. Look at the trembling of those in power, because ultimately the power is in the people whose hearts and minds are touched by the Spirit of the living God. And so let us commit today not to seek after or glory in material things or mammon or the standards of the world, but to grow that vision of a more just and a more peaceful world. Let us become drum majors for justice, for peace and goodwill. And so we want to reiterate that now is the time to do a new thing. So I encourage you in the words of an old black spiritual, walk together, children, and don't you get weary. Walk together, children, and don't you get weary. Walk together, children, and don't you get weary, because there is a great camp meeting in the promised land. You've heard about the promised land. There's light on the other side of darkness. There's peace on the other side of the war economy. There's a beautiful common humanity on the other side of white supremacy. There is hope on the other side of hopelessness. There is victory on the other side of hardship. There's shouting on the other side of weeping. Yes, walk together, children, and don't you get weary. Walk together, children, and don't you get weary. With our faith firmly rooted in the supreme value of love that causes us to seek the good of the neighbor. And so we leave you tonight knocked down by all of how bad it looked. But let us believe together that if we walk together, we shall be victorious. We will be victorious. Walk together, walk together, walk together, forward together, not one step back.
Reverend Johnson, that was more than a bunt. We're not even playing baseball here. This is a great choir, and you brought your voice to join it. Amen to that. Well, we can't have a message like that without a clear call to action. So real quickly, 3 things you can do. If you go to the gathering page on breachrepairers.org, you can find a slide that has these 3 action items. The first thing I wanted to invite you to do tonight is to listen to the veterans who are really leading this call. We wanted to point you towards Veterans for Peace, who've been with us tonight, point you towards CODEPINK and those veteran families that have been organizing and speaking out, and also to our sisters and brothers in Afghanistan with the Afghan Peace Volunteers. So that's the first thing, to link up with those folks in your communities. These are organizations that have chapters. Certainly the veterans groups have chapters around the country in communities. Link up and listen to those folks. We think they're a crucial part of this campaign as we're building. Number 2, wanted to mention real specifically that right now, under the War Powers Act, the United States is engaged in an illegal war. Now we know we have a war without end, but there's an illegal war that's never been declared, that nevertheless our military is supporting, Saudi Arabia's war against Yemen. We've said here many times that when it comes to politics, we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only issues that we're concerned about. So we have a Republican congressman from this state here in North Carolina, Walter Jones, who has sponsored House Resolution number 81, I believe it is. And it is an act of Congress to call an end to this war, because only Congress has the authority to declare that war. We want you to call your congressional representative, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, and ask them to support that bill. Let's at least say that the illegal wars should end immediately. And finally, we want to continue to build this Poor People's Campaign, because as Reverend Johnson has explained so clearly, all of these issues intersect, and we have to change this narrative. And that's what we're doing with the Poor People's Campaign. Please sign up if you haven't yet. You'll begin to receive a steady stream of information, including regular updates about this gathering. But on the Poor People's Campaign, let me invite real quickly Reverend Erica Williams and Clinton Wright, 2 of the organizers with the Pairs of the Breach, to come and give you some specific updates on the campaign and about what's happening over the next few weeks.
Let's give it up for Reverend Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove. And I can't get over Reverend Johnson's sermon. Let's give him another round of applause. So for the Poor People's Campaign, you all have work to do. Every single one of you have work to do. And that's to talk about the Poor People's Campaign. Tell everyone you know about the Poor People's Campaign. Share the pledge card with your friends and family members. You can get the pledge card via an online version at poorpeoplescampaign.org to really organize your community and bring people out. This month we have 2 mass meetings. Tomorrow night, if you're a night owl, raise your hand if you're a night owl. You're up late? Oh, good. Because tomorrow night, the Poor People's Campaign's in Seattle, and they start at 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is 9 p.m. our time. So if you're up late tomorrow night, you can tune in and watch the mass meeting in Seattle, and you can do that at breachrepairs.org/livestream. And then later this month on the 19th, which is a Sunday, we'll be in Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah. And we are literally bringing together all of the states that are rooted in a deep tradition of organizing in this movement of liberation and freedom in Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana and Florida and Texas and South Carolina. Notice a theme? It's like the South, right? Exactly. So that's on the 19th of November, and that's at 5 p.m. Eastern or Central Time. So that's a good time for us to all watch. So tune in, share the pledge card, tell everyone you know in your community and your workplace and your faith houses to join us for the Poor People's Campaign, because we're going to change this country this year and move it forward.
That's right. Gathering family, how are you tonight? Oh, I don't believe you. How are you tonight? I don't know about you, but my heart is stirred and my mind is focused after that powerful sermon by Reverend Nelson Johnson. It's our own family. Let's show him some love. Let's show him some love. This has indeed been an amazing journey. How many of you have been with us since June? All right. And I don't know about you, but I am more focused and ready now more than ever because of the gathering. Because it's always good for us to come together to get the knowledge on why we fight. What Reverend Barber always say, it's not good to be loud and wrong. And I know I'm loud, so I need to be right. So I better learn. But we thank all of you so much for joining us these last few months. We have had a good time with you. We hope you've had a good time with us. And so we ask that you go online to our Breach Repairers page. There's a blog. It's on the sheet you got. And look at all of the past gatherings we've had. We started in June with health care. Right? Anybody, what did we start with? What was in July? Who know? What was it? Gerrymandering. What was it? That's right. Who said it? Voter suppression. What was in August? Immigration. What was in September? Labor rights. What was in October? And what was this month? Oh, everybody should have been able to answer that one. But we ask that you share all of those gatherings, because it's just not enough for us to have them online. We need the world to know the truth. So please share all of the gatherings with your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, anybody, because I promise you they will gain a lot from those gatherings, and we'll be getting them ready to join us in January of next year, right? So as we get ready to close out tonight, I need us all to stand together. I need us to give a major round of applause. And he didn't know I was going to do this, but I need for us to show some love to Brother Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove. He was the one who brought this together with Reverend Barber, because he said we need to bring people together to know what it means to be together in community and to learn and to grow. So we got to show it louder for Brother Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove. He don't like no credit, but I believe in giving credit where credit is due. And it takes work to put things like this together. So family, please, as you leave here tonight, give somebody a hug and let them know we're in it to win it together. We love you.
And family, as you're leaving, if you could help us by stacking chairs. We don't need to scoot chairs anywhere, but if we could make nice, pretty stacks, that'll help us clean up at the end of the night. But please don't scoot them across. Ben & Jerry's still has ice cream. That One Sweet World is a great flavor. It's supporting the Poor People's Campaign. Thank y'all for coming out tonight.
Let me also real quickly say, for folks here in North Carolina, we got a brother at the door from Veterans for Peace who can let you know about a local thing they have here in Raleigh. Veterans for Peace, it's here through Armistice Day. You can grab that from him at the door for folks here in North Carolina.